Mia stood on the cracked front porch, staring up at the decrepit Victorian house she had never known existed until a week ago. The lawyer's phone call still echoed in her mind. "You've inherited the Stokes estate, your grandmother's home." A grandmother she barely remembered, and a house that felt more like a cursed relic than a family legacy. The house seemed to loom over her, its windows like dead eyes, reflecting the dying afternoon light. Vines crawled up the side of the building, strangling the weathered wood. The place smelled like wet earth and decay, an unmistakable sign of long abandonment. Mia took a deep breath, gripping the keys in her pocket. It was just a house, no reason to feel afraid. She stepped forward, the wooden boards creaking under her feet, as if the house was already groaning at her presence. She turned the key in the rusted lock and pushed the door open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust. Furniture covered in white sheets stood like ghosts frozen in time. The hallway stretched before her, its walls lined with portraits of strangers, staring, always staring. As she made her way deeper into the house, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. A creaking sound from above made her freeze. Her eyes drifted upward toward the ceiling. Mia explored the ground floor, hoping to shake off the sense of unease. The living room was a picture of disrepair, its once elegant furniture now moth-eaten and dull. The kitchen smelled faintly of mold, and the dining room still held the remnants of a long-forgotten meal, plates and silverware crusted with age. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the attic. In the far corner of the house, she found a narrow, steep staircase leading upward. At the top, an old wooden door stood locked tight. Mia rattled the handle. It didn't budge. Her heart raced as she imagined what could be hidden behind it. The lawyer hadn't mentioned anything about an attic, and there had been no second key. Determined, she scoured the house for something to pry the door open. In a small study, she found an old iron crowbar resting by the fireplace, as if someone had placed it there for this very purpose. Her hands trembled as she wedged the crowbar into the lock, applying pressure until the door finally gave way with a loud, echoing crack. Dust billowed out in a thick cloud, making her cough. She hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The attic was even darker than she imagined, illuminated only by a single grime-covered window. Boxes were piled haphazardly around the room, some bursting open with old, moth-eaten clothes and family relics. In the corner, a trunk lay with its lid slightly ajar. A sudden whisper brushed against her ear, soft but unmistakable. Mia spun around, her heart in her throat. No one was there. The whisper followed Mia for the rest of the night. She couldn't shake the sensation that someone or something was in the attic with her, watching her as she moved about the house. She tried to convince herself it was just the wind, maybe an old draft moving through the broken windows. But deep down, she knew better. After spending the rest of the day clearing out cobwebs and setting up her bed, Mia found herself standing once more at the base of the attic stairs, staring up into the darkness. The whisper hadn't been imagined. She was sure of it now. It had been too real, too close. She decided to confront it. With a flashlight in hand, Mia climbed the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She stepped into the attic, sweeping the beam of light across the dusty floor. The whisper returned, this time clearer, like a voice just out of reach. "Mia?" She froze, the light trembling in her grip. The voice was soft, almost pleading, but it was her name. Someone, or something, knew she was here. Her gaze darted to the trunk in the corner. She hadn't opened it fully before, but now, compelled by the voice, she knelt before it. The lock was old and rusted, easily snapped open with a firm tug. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a small leather-bound journal. As she opened the journal, the whispers grew louder, filling her mind with faint, unintelligible words. She could almost make out the voice now. Feminine, urgent. The journal belonged to her grandmother, detailing her slow descent into madness after moving into the house. The last entry chilled Mia to her core. The attic is the key. They are waiting for me there. The shadows have whispered for too long. I must answer. Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut with a deafening bang. Mia's breath came in short, panicked bursts. She raced to the attic door, yanking on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. She was trapped. Her flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls, and the whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. "Mia, please." The voice was clearer now, desperate. It wasn't a malicious tone, but its presence sent icy chills down her spine. She backed away from the door, pressing herself against the far wall. The attic seemed to close in around her, the walls almost breathing as they groaned in the darkness. Then, in the center of the room, something began to take shape. A figure, faint at first, like a shadow cut from the air itself, slowly materialized. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow but fixed on Mia. She wore an old-fashioned dress, the fabric tattered and torn, her hands outstretched as if reaching for help. "Mia," the figure whispered again, her voice broken and full of sorrow. Mia felt her knees buckle as fear gripped her. She recognized the face. It was her grandmother, the same woman from the portraits, but now twisted into something ghostly and tortured. "Why didn't you come sooner?" the apparition said, her voice wavering. "I needed you to help me." Mia's heart raced as the figure moved closer, the air around her growing colder. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body was frozen in place. The whispers enveloped her, drowning her in a sea of voices as the figure reached for her. Mia woke with a scare, gasping for air. She was lying on the floor of the attic, the journal still in her hand. The figure was gone, but the chill in the air remained. The attic door now stood slightly open, as if the house had decided to let her go for now. Shaken but determined, Mia sat up and flipped through the remaining pages of the journal. Her grandmother had known something about the house, something that had driven her to madness. There were mentions of the voices, of shadows that speak, and of a ritual she had never completed. The journal spoke of an old family curse, a binding placed on the house centuries ago when the original owners, Mia's ancestors, had dabbled in dark practices. The whispers were the remnants of those bound souls trapped in the attic for eternity. Her grandmother had tried to end it, but she had failed. Now the responsibility had fallen to Mia. The only way to silence the voices, the journal said, was to complete the ritual, something her grandmother had attempted, but failed. Mia would need to gather the relics hidden throughout the house, each one tied to the souls trapped within the attic. These relics, an old locket, a rusted key, and a silver mirror, would serve as conduits to break the curse. Determined, Mia ventured into the house again, her flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. Each room seemed to resist her presence, the shadows growing heavier as the night wore on. She found the locket buried in the dirt of the garden, the key hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the study, and the mirror tucked away in a forgotten bedroom. With the items in hand, Mia returned to the attic, where the air had grown cold and oppressive. The whispers had escalated into frantic murmurs, swirling around her like a dark fog. The ghostly figure of her grandmother appeared again, standing by the old trunk, watching her with pleading eyes. Mia placed the relics in a circle as described in the journal, her hands trembling with fear. She read the final passage aloud, her voice shaking as the words left her lips. "By these tokens of blood and bone, I release thee from the curse of stone. Shadows return to the dust from whence you came. I break the chains of sorrow and shame." The room seemed to shudder, the walls vibrating as the whispers reached a fevered pitch. The ghost of her grandmother smiled faintly, her figure dissolving into the air. The shadows in the room swirled violently before collapsing inward, like a vacuum pulling them into oblivion. Then, silence. The oppressive weight lifted, the air becoming lighter. The attic, once a place of torment and sorrow, now felt still. The curse had been broken. Mia sat on the floor, her heart still racing, but relief washed over her. The house, at last, was free of its haunting whispers. Her grandmother's soul had found peace, and the shadows that had plagued her family for generations were finally laid to rest. As Mia stepped out of the attic, she knew the house no longer held the darkness it once did. She would sell it, let someone else restore its beauty, without the ghosts of the past. But as she closed the door one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere deep within the walls, the shadows still remembered.